Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you another League of Legends related video, and welcome to episode 6, I believe, of the Dangerous Game podcast. This week, guys, I want to talk to you guys about LCS, because LCS starts up again for its summer split this next week, not this coming weekend. But this past couple days, we did get to see the academy teams get to play, and there were some interesting results. Seeing as like Clutch Gaming actually started off with a 2-0, as you know they struggled to get a single win as of last split. That was kind of interesting. Either way, I want to start off by saying that we're going to be talking about power rankings, my own personal power rankings of these teams, and along the lines, I will be talking about hopes that I have for each of these teams. And then also kind of to wrap around at the end of the video, I want to talk about expansion ideas for the LCS in the future and things that I think could add in a bit of a better competitive scene for the current LCS. Me and quite a few other people have some personal opinions that the LCS is just not as competitive as other regions, and one of the reasons I'm going to be bringing up is the number of teams and how I think more teams would probably add in for more competition. Anyhow, let's get started with power rankings. First off, we're going to go through the list one by one, and I'm going to kind of give you the reasons, or kind of allude to the reasons, at least, that I have each of these teams in these positions. Number one is going to be to no surprise to anyone. I'm going with the easy cop out here, and I'm just going to say Team Liquid. Team Liquid has proven for multiple splits in a row that they are the team to beat. Even at their weakest points, they are still better than the worst teams in the LCS, and so it's hard to not imagine them as the first place team. As much as I don't want to per se, as I don't care for the narrative that Doublelift is the All-American who has pulled himself to being the best in North America. I'm kind of tired of that narrative. He's still not proven himself internationally to win. I mean, yeah, cool. He made it to the finals this time, guys. I'm not going to discredit that. I'm not going to say that he didn't deserve that. But he has tried for the entirety of his LCS career to do something like that. And the best he has done is second place internationally, which is still impressive. I'm not going to discount it, but where is his titles to show it? Over the past couple of years were the first times he was getting LCS titles, let alone now he has some international recognition. I don't know. I'm tired of his narrative. I want something else to come into the spotlight. Hey, if he wins, cool, good for him. If he doesn't, whatever, I don't give a crap. Next up, we're going to Cloud9, and I'm putting Cloud9 here and TSM3, and I'm going to talk about these two teams together because there is an extremely close competition between the two of them. I feel like Team Liquid is just barely edging out ahead of them, and that's just because they keep managing to do it. I don't think they're actually that much of a better team than Cloud9 or TSM. And if anything, actually, I believe Cloud9 and TSM have different angles that they are better at the game than Team Liquid. Team Liquid is just a unified team. It works really well synergistically, but I think that they work well on the macro side of things, and when they started putting into the micro side of things, they do all have some very individual talents there. But I feel like they start flopping in the macro play when they focus so hard on this skirmishing fighting style that G2 went with. Now, when we look at Cloud9 and TSM, they both kind of have a antithesis to that. They use that skirmishing style to make up for macro decision playing that they weren't the greatest at. To just raw beat the opponent out of position so they can't fight them over the macro decisions. And I feel like these two are just very close in general. I feel like Cloud9 has always been the better summer team, though. And so I just feel like Cloud9 is going to take that second place spot. Now, mind you, the 1 through 3 spots are very much up in the air. Any one of them could take the first place spot. But I think Team Liquid will still manage to do it just because they keep doing it. But I think Cloud9 is going to take second because summer is just where Cloud9 happens to dominate, and TSM happens to falter. So Especially now. The biggest concern I have for TSM actually is going to be the fact that they have announced that they're going to do a two-man jungle split for their main roster, which means that Grig is coming back. He's going to get some playtime, and Acadian's going to get some playtime. And the only reason I believe they're actually going to commit to this is because they picked up a third jungler to be their academy jungler. So these two are actually both on the main roster, which means that they will probably get some split time between them. But I'm not going to discount the fact that I believe that TSM is going to fall back into the same hole that Ziggs likes to go to and TSM likes to go to, which is, hey, this is my five-man team. I'm just going to keep holding on to these guys, and we're just going to keep using these five. Which means one of those junglers is just going to be in a position where he does nothing other than play in a couple of maybe the scrims off of stage, but who knows. Next up, I think 4 through 6 is also extremely competitive. Actually, 4 through 10 could be very competitive. I feel like all these teams have shored up a lot of the problems that they had last split, though we haven't gotten to see them play yet. We don't know how many of those problems are gone, but on paper it feels like almost every team from 4 through 10 has potential to be 4 through 10. Now, I do believe that Golden Guardians and FlyQuest are slightly above the rest, and I feel like the gap between them, TSM, Cloud9, and Team Liquid is closer than any of the other teams. So I'm putting those two teams in the order of GGS in 4th and FlyQuest in 5th. And I know FlyQuest beat Golden Guardians, but it was a very close series, and Golden Guardians almost eked out that win last playoffs. So I think that they're going to do better overall because they also didn't make any roster changes, which means that all that practice time they've had since spring has been on the same 5 people. Meanwhile, FlyQuest decided to make a change to what did, which means they have to learn a new support play style. They have to integrate him into the team, and Turtle has to learn to play with somebody. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that they can't do it. I feel like FlyQuest is an established group of pretty solid veterans at this point, with some pretty high-end from each of these players, and the abilities that each of these players have to work with new teams is pretty good. So I feel like they'll do fine, but I feel like GGS has just had more consistent time to play with the same people, that they're just going to be slightly ahead. Now, in the 6th place, I have Echo Fox, and I put Echo Fox here because they managed to get it at the end of the last playoffs. But on top of that, I feel like these guys are consistently a playoff run team. Just on paper, these guys are good, and towards the end of last split, if they manage to keep up that momentum that they had going, I think they have a chance to actually, potentially go even higher than 6 this time around. A lot of people discounted them because they had a kind of rough early start last split. And, that's kind of understandable a bit. You're bringing a guy that has been playing in Korea for a long time back to North America. And yes, he might have mechanically gotten better in Korea. But the problem is the scenes are so different that it's gonna cause problems no matter who you are. Like, Rush being as godly as Rush has been in North America, he didn't seem all that amazing in Korea. So him coming back, he's coming back with, oh, I've learned a lot there. But the problem is that we've also seen that the Korean meta has struggled with the past 2 years of competition. So I feel like he himself has now had enough time to where he should be back into the groove of things here in North America. I feel like Apollo and Hakuo, always start off as that rock at the beginning of the season, and if they can, start off and actually winning at the beginning of the season, I think this team is going to start going off. Solo has a lot of potential to be very good, and I think Phoenix can get back to, what he had back when he first moved on to Team Liquid way back in the day. I think this team has a good chance of actually proving me wrong and going a little higher. Now, they do also have a definite negative side to this coin, of where, in this coin flip, they could just plummet horribly and be that 10th place team. And that's where, why the standings become so hard, is because each of the teams 7 and down have that exact same MO as Echo Fox. There's nothing that I can say, differently about each of them, other than they have different people and different pieces that make it. So I'm just going to kind of run down that list real quick. In 7th, I put Optic, and the biggest reason is I feel like Crown has that carry potential more so than almost any other person on all of the other rosters, except maybe Power of Evil and CLG. CLG did get ruined, but I don't think that fixes their problem. I think a big part of their problem is that they have a somewhat inexperienced jungler and a very middle of the pack bot lane. Biofrost and Stixay are not, top contenders for either of their roles. Yeah, they're both pretty solid players, but they are players that are kind of like the Tony Romos of their position. They'll put up good numbers. They'll be considered a very good player in that position, but they don't win. So, I think that's going to be the case for this team. And um, other than Power of Evil on that roster, I think there isn't much on that roster. So that's why I think Optic has the number one potential for carry here. Now, 100 Thieves is right after them, and that's because Someday is also in that position. You also have Bang, who could go off. And they have Amazing now as a really good supportive piece for them. And really, 100 Thieves could be anywhere between 4th and I think the lowest they can be is 8th, and that's where I put them as 8th actually. And the only reason is I'm backpedaling a bit here on what I just said, and that's because Bang didn't do jack crap last split. Someday didn't have the potential to do anything because they had Anda, and Anda didn't do anything in the jungle. And they didn't have a good mid lane. They had Hui being a great person and a great shot caller and knowledge individual. The problem is that his not his competitive nature, but his actual skill as a micro player was so bad in comparison to everybody else that's in the LCS that he was a very big weak link. And so, they've definitely upgraded in their positions. I mean, Amazing I think is by far better than Anda. I think that's an amazing upgrade there by them. No pun intended, but I feel like they did a very good job in choosing him. I think he also did a very good job of choosing North America as his home region back in the day when they tried to grandfather him in. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll take North America because it's actually a much smarter play by him. Think about it. He can make North America his home, which means he doesn't take an import slot in NA. So he could go to like any NA team, which most of them would be like, yeah, let's take Amazing because jungle is like a hard to find spot. Other than maybe Optic, and the top 3 teams. And then you go over to Europe, and if Europe really needs a jungler, yeah, they'll take him. They don't import that much into Europe anyways. Like, each team maybe has one person imported in a European team. So, that's huge. Like, yeah, sure, we'll waste an import slot on getting Amazing over here. Like, that's fine. Like, I think that was a very smart move by him. But that's kind of off topic a little bit there. But either way, I think they finish in that 8th place spot. I feel like just because of last split, there's still just such a bad taste in my mouth. This unfortunately leaves one of my favorite teams, Clutch Gaming, in 9th. And realistically, it's because I can't see them doing phenomenal. I felt like these guys had so much potential. They had so much to live up to, and they flopped so hard, right? Like, you have Huni, Lyra are just like 2 of the best in their roles previously. A couple of years ago, both of these guys were contenders as best in their roles in North America. Lyra had 2-3 good splits, and then he's fallen off the face of the earth. Huni kind of had the same. Like, Huni had about 2 years where he was God King Huni, went to Korea, was splitting time with Antaro, and, like, he was good, but he wasn't, like, great, and then he left Korea, and he has never been back to form. And I feel like going back to Korea once you've already been out and abroad can ruin the potential of a player like Huni. And I think he has potential to come back. He's shown it. There's been sparks of brilliance from him, but if he doesn't get back to form, they're not great. If Lyra can't get out of this hole that he's dug himself into, there's no chance there. Mid lane Demonte has potential, but I feel like he leans so much on these these veteran players that if they tilt a little bit, even if he's doing well, he's just going to give up. Which leaves the bot lane, which they've announced Cody Sun is the starting ADC, which I am hyped about. I believed that getting rid of Piglet might have been the wrong move. They could work with Piglet. He has a lot of potential, but I do believe that playstyle wise, I felt like Cody Sun always had a better spot on this team. I mentioned it last year, actually, or last split, that I felt like Cody Sun would have been the better choice there. But yes, they were moving Vulcan and Piglet, who'd worked together, up when they picked up Cody Sun. And if they had put Cody Sun in sooner, I think they could have salvaged last split a little bit more because of just the fact that he is a very good mid-game player, and he's always been very good at not requiring as much assistance. He's a safe laner, and even in the games that he did play at the end of last split, he did well. He didn't do like phenomenal, but he did well. That being the case, they also threw Piglet in there because mechanically Piglet is a pretty epic player. So, you want to put in your best roster, and they thought that was the case, and unfortunately it didn't work. And they ended up ninth last split, and I think, this is just going to be befitting of them again. This is just where they're going to end up again, unfortunately. Last off, we have CLG in 10th place, and, I've already kind of given my reasons for them. I feel like their team is subpar in pretty much every role except for now Ruin and Power of Evil. Wiggly is just, he's good. He's just not, I think he needs more experience, and maybe he can become a great jungler, but I don't see it. I don't see it from their coaching staff. I don't see it from the team itself. Stixay and Biofrost have both been quote-unquote veteran players now, and neither of them has shown anything for it, really. Biofrost was on a TSM team that did well until they went international, and they frickin' sucked, and then they booted his ass like they always do. And Stixay's been on CLG, where he got one LCS championship, which was impressive, and then went to he went to finals at an MSI, which also was impressive. And then his career ended. He's done absolutely nothing since then. It's one of the saddest things I've seen in a long time. But I don't know. I just feel CLG has a much lower low than they have a higher high in comparison to everybody else. So those are my power ranking, guys. Along with it, like I said, I kind of weaved in my my feelings as to how I feel each team would do. If I were to rank teams based off of how I wanted them to be ranked, Clutch would be number 1. I think Echo Fox followed by Optic, 100 Thieves, GGS, FlyQuest, which is kind of funny that they end up at roughly the same position. And then the top teams would be below that, and it's not because I hate the top teams. I just feel like that would be a more interesting narratives that none of the top teams made it. But we'll see. There's chance of that, of course. But let's kind of wrap to the next topic of the video, and this is still about the LCS, of course, but this is expansion ideas that I feel would potentially help the LCS in the long run and potentially build a new fan base towards it and encourage the current fan base to try harder to becoming pros. And the biggest reason for that is North America is one of the largest viewed esports, and the LCS is the largest viewed esport in North America, one of them, right? Like, there's always ridiculous numbers of like a couple 100,000 people watching most of the top games to it. Now, what would happen if we added more teams? Now, the dynamic of this would be problematic for the broadcast side of it, right? So I'm going to start off with some of the negatives if we added more teams. And specifically, I want to add 6 more teams. And I'll get to the reasons why here in a minute, but I want to talk about the negatives of doing so. So the negatives would be that the weekend takes longer to broadcast, right? Everybody may be only getting 1 game a weekend now, opposed to 2 games a weekend, which is more along the lines of like NFL, which I think becomes a positive, and that will be part of the positives here soon. But they only get 1 day a weekend that they are playing, which could mean we could do best of 2s, kind of like how Europe did it for a while, and then Korea had done it for a while, best of 2s, where you could end up with ties and stuff, which adds in for much more interesting dynamics, right? And best of 2s are much faster than best of 3s still, usually, right? And so if that's the case, then, if we can get these ideas of better games coming out, or, maybe less games overall. We don't do best of 2s. We do the best of 1s still because, again, saving on time, and that's how Riot loves to do it. We'd have 1 game for each team a weekend, which means that everybody plays 10 games at the end of the split. There's a chance you don't play the same games, which then adds for the dynamic like the NFL, where you don't get to play everybody this year. But what happens if we play them next year? Or what happens if they'd played each other? What would have happened then? And then we end up with a lot more diverse dynamic as to, what could have happened, and more speculation and more interest. And I feel like it adds a larger analytical scene to it as well. On top of that, when you add 6 more teams, that's more spots. Guess what, guys? That's 30 more LCS spots. This means you could get more of the imports from the OPL, from the Turkish region, from the emerging scenes. You could get more North American talents that are risky and stuff. And you're kind of gambling on these guys. There's a wider range as to, hey, I made it into the top, 9. That's not that bad. I mean, we're in the bottom half of the group now, but like the bottom half being that there's still 7 other teams behind me now. And there's 8 ahead of me. But let's also think about it this way. We could also change the playoffs to the top 8 opposed to the top 6 teams, which means we don't have anybody getting buys, which means that you go from quarters into semis into playoff or into the finals, and there hadn't been a bye, which means that there's more narratives for the top teams not making it through. There's more narratives that hey, the random underdogs just managed to beat the top teams in a best of 5, and then oh my God, look, it's going to be like, oh God, Optic is versing Echo Fox because Optic managed to knock out TSM because TSM wasn't ready for them, and Echo Fox beat Golden Guardians. Like, there's so many different narratives that could happen now. Like, you open yourself up to a wider audience, as well. And I feel like this broader scope of it, the more games brings in for more potential fans, because then you could start doing something similar to the Overwatch League, right, where you start assigning people kind of a city they might be attached to, or a region. Clutch has kind of claimed that they are the Texas team, which is kind of neat. Golden Guardians is probably going to go angling for we're the Golden State guys, we're the Golden Guardians, we are the Californian team. So like, if you start having teams that are already doing that as is in the current setup of things, imagine what you could do with 16 teams. On top of that, I think the biggest advantage here is that there's just more slots, which means more North American talent can rise up. And a lot of people might be like, well, that means that the competitive integrity is less. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. When there are more options for people, more people are going to try for it, which means that you're going to get people that are going to do even better things than they're currently doing, which should increase the competitive nature of solo queue. Because if that's the feeding pool, right, like solo queue is the feeding pool and the breeding pool for all these pro players, there's now a lot of slots we have to get. That means that a lot of people have potential to come to North America. That means there's a lot more investors that could come into the LCS. That means there's a lot more sponsors that can enter the LCS. It means the broadcast quality could get better. It means more skins, more icons, more all these things that could amp up the money value of it as well, which can entice more players, because if there's more money, you can have more players, and if there's more spots, you can have more players. So like, now you have the room for the players, you have the money for the players potentially coming in. And the competitive nature is like, yeah, sure, there's 2 more slots to playoffs, but there's also 6 extra teams that weren't there before. So playoffs are even, they're roughly the same contention as they were before. Yes, there's a slightly better chance of it now because it's the top 50 teams, the top 50% teams going in, the 50% highest teams and the 50% lowest teams. But on top of that, you could have that narrative that, the 50% lowest teams play in their own tournament after, that goes off. You have the small tournament going on so that, they're fighting it out to see who's the best of those teams. And then the lowest team gets kind of I don't know, they get priority for trying to find new talent. I don't know. Maybe we could figure out some type of draft pool similar to the NFL or something like that, where you don't take the teams that are already out there, the players that are already out there, but you start putting in other teams, or other players, all these new players, and you start drafting up these newer players, and you have the potential for grabbing larger rosters. I think also one of the next biggest things is increasing the roster limit to 10. Increasing this, you could have a 10-man roster, and then increasing that at Worlds as well, so you could have a 10-man roster. So all the other regions are like, oh, we could build with 10-man rosters. We could start thinking stuff out. That adds even more spots for people. Now, if you do that, there's argument that you can't have enough players for competitive integrity reasons for adding in those 6 extra teams. So maybe we belay that, maybe just add it in so you could have 3 extra roster slots at Worlds. So it's just like, oh, we could play with like we could play like an 8-man team, and like there might be enough for that. But I think that adding more space in competition can increase the nature of the competition tenfold, because there's more chance for everybody else to be like, I have a chance now. Like, there's these teams, they need players. There's a chance for me now. And so, like, it also stirs up the fan base more because they're like, oh my God, I have a chance again. Because the biggest part, I think, of one of the big failures of the LCS right now had been stagnant. The player pool has been very stagnant for the past, 5 years maybe. We've seen pretty much the same faces, excluding, Korean imports. There hasn't been a whole lot of new blood. I mean, yes, Cloud9 has a few new bloods. You have a few new bloods on a couple of other teams, but there's only maybe one here or there on some teams. And even then, it's not a whole lot. You don't see just a new team like back in the day. Team 8 came out of nowhere with a group of people. The only person they knew on that team was Maple Street, and that's because that was the odd one's brother, and like everybody else was like, who the hell are these guys? And you used to have those cool narratives where these underdogs come in and just sweep the teams. With extra teams, you could have that happen. You could have people like LS, for instance. He's a big analyst that moved over to Korea now, and he's starting to build up teams on the BBQ Olivers. Um, and they're building up teams of players that nobody's heard of, and they did relatively okay. And like he's known for finding that talent, and you'd have more people that could become analytical minds like him, finding places on teams to be digging through the North American talents and finding people within the that diamond in the rough type thing. Um, yeah, of course, this is all speculation by me, and we wouldn't know how it would work until if Riot would implement it. But I feel like it would become a better thing overall. You have more room for players. You get more players wanting to be competitive because now they feel like there's places that they have a spot to take a chance on to get. Because the stagnant pool has been stagnant for a while. Where are their chances there, other than academy? You can now do this. On top of that, I feel like one of the biggest things that with the current system they could change, even if they didn't change any of these expansion ideas, they could change how the academy teams work. How do they play against each other? How should the academy system work? And I feel like the tournament needs to be held in higher regard. Maybe do a semi-pro worlds one, because academy teams are essentially semi-pros. They are very close to pros, but they're not quite there. And so if that's the case, do a worlds for semi-pros so that you get academy teams from Europe, Korea's, lesser teams. China has some, I imagine. LMS, the JPL, whatever the Japan one is, like OPL, all these other ones. You could grab they're less and maybe you can even grab the emerging region people and just give them spots on there, and our academy teams have to fight to get there. Because guess what, I bet their pro teams could probably beat our academy teams. So if that's the case, you set up a world for these emerging regions, and like the top 4 teams from that get to go into the play-ins, right? Like, so we don't have to have that play-in stage. We have this big tournament that's like, you are now the semi-pro world champions, and then like a month or two later we have, hey, guess what, we have worlds coming up, and the semi-pro guys get to go try to compete in worlds and see who does well there. So you could end up with guys from all the different emerging regions, or you could just end up with academy teams from the best regions coming in and fighting it out. Like, that's another thing they could do, and it would give them more things to gain more viewers. It would have a bigger marketing platform and a better chance for the fan base to be like, wow, it's even good to become an academy player now, because look, they win so much money just playing on academy now. And it would give these academy guys who aren't getting the chances on the LCS stage to prove themselves, so that teams that are maybe not their LCS teams could be like, that guy seemed really, really good in this tournament. Why don't we go for him? Type things. Give more scouting for teams and give them a better chance to kind of broaden their horizons past, we are stuck with our veterans. Our veterans will be the best in the world, when they could discover the next Caps, but they don't know it's him because they're never giving him a chance. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate every single one of you. I always love making these videos for you guys, and I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. I know it doesn't have any real direction or coherent theme other than League of Legends, but I hope to continue making these, and I hope to see you guys in every video. And as always, please follow, like, subscribe, head over to my Twitch, drop a follow if you like. Head over to my Twitter and start, watching me type absolutely nothing on it, or my Facebook and see that I never show up on there either. Thank you again, guys. And as always, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day.